When it comes to Kill, it may seem like a straightforward beat 'em up, but it sets a precedent because of how much it provides as a film that is going to make it very difficult for any action film that comes after it to even hold a candle to it. So to summarize the film, and just note, I may not be pronouncing these names right. Amrit is a commando in the Indian Army, and with him having some time off, he wants to get engaged and married to his beloved, whose name is Talika. Talika? Anyway, she comes from a very affluent family, and he, while has a notable role as a person of the military, it's not exactly on the same level. So while he loves her and she loves him, at the same time her father wants her to marry somebody of status. But being that Amrit is not against messing up whatever arranged marriage her father comes up with, he follows her, she knows about it, and on a train while they're going to Delhi, things go to hell. A man named Fanny with his whole family, about 24 plus members, they are robbing the train, and once they find out about Talika's family being on there, the idea of kidnapping them for a ransom comes about. Now, being that Amrit is a soldier and he has one of his friends with him, the idea becomes to protect and rescue Talika and her family, and this could be a means of impressing them enough to get her hand in marriage. But what Amrit doesn't realize is that when it comes to Fanny, especially with him having this big hulking cousin named Sudi, this is not going to be an easy task, and it's not going to be just knock out a few people, scare them off, and you're the big hero. There's going to be a lot of violence required to get through this, and in the process of trying to protect and save, he's going to have to suffer some losses. So first and foremost, when it comes to this movie, what we love is the sound. One of the films that we always kind of put on a pedestal when it comes to any action movie, especially action movies that are about fighting more than car chases and gunfights and stuff like that, is Atomic Blonde. That film made us wince, grimace, all those type of words, and I don't think too many films have really tried to knock it off that pedestal or else join it on that pedestal, and that was almost 8 years ago when that movie came out. Kill puts in a valiant effort to the point where it definitely deserves to be in the same conversation for the way that it makes the sound effects when people get punched, when people get stabbed, when people get bashed into things. It's, even if you're somebody who feels quite used to the sound of violence, this is a type of film that, similar to how Civil War really kind of upped the sound level when it came to gunfire so that it's not just stuff in the background of noise that's happening, that's what Kill does. It makes an effort to remind you that getting hit hurts. And it's not just something that happens and leads to a bunch of cool choreography, but people do get bruises, people do get broken bones, and it's nothing to just be entertained by because it is truly violence happening in front of you. With that said, a special highlight has to be given to the role of Sadi, and I know it's kind of weird to give a special highlight for a villain, especially one who's not bigger than the hero in some type of DC type of way like Joker is the Batman. But what we liked about Sadi is that he represented why this film is so much more than just a beat 'em up. For as a villain, he is one of the strongest to the point where you would think he would be the final boss, not Fani, who's the most charismatic. And there's just something about a character who can not only whip ass and take names, but also has these emotional moments that kind of make you think that maybe he's not the villain here. It's just the perspective that makes him look that way, that makes Kill such a complicated film for. Again, Fanny's family is the ones who are the bandits, and you could assume that it's because they're poor, so what else are they gonna do but rob the people who are rich, middle class, who can afford nice things in order to sell them and support the family. And when you watch Sadi learn that people like Amrit on the train, he's taking people out, and he's not just losing some henchmen, but he's losing his brothers, he's losing his cousins, his uncle, and other people. it brings a new layer to the whole idea of what they're fighting for, and it makes it so that when you see this man cry, it's not just crying out of frustration, but you see him crying in a sense of mourning, and it kind of takes you back in a way to remind you that when it comes to heroes, like bringing in the Marvel heroes, yes, they're the ones that are bringing justice and technically are the ones who we should be rooting for, but you can never discount the collateral damage and all the stuff that they do. So the next highlight for us is when it comes to Amari, they treat his character not as somebody who's this Rambo guy, and even in the film they kind of call him that when he keeps moving despite his injuries, but once that adrenaline dies down, we see an adjustment being made. Now he has to change his strategy when it comes to taking on everybody. Now he has to start taking breaks and figure out ways to hide so he can, either try to not fix a wound, but kind of tie up a bleeding wound, or else to catch his breath. And if he fights too long, you see his style of fighting degrade, and eventually he starts making mistakes that lead to him ending up on the floor, him getting hit more. And just seeing that kind of back and forth, especially with how tight the location is for when he has to fight, it makes you all the more question, if not suspended disbelief, that everything's going to be fine and that he'll survive, his girlfriend survive, and they'll have happy ever after. You get the sense that something could definitely go wrong here and that you may not get that happy ending, which again adds on to this feeling that this film doesn't want to just follow the blueprint, make a hit that's featuring Indian people and move on. Which leads to the last highlight, in that this film is not devoid of emotion. It's not just some simple film about this guy who loves this girl and will do anything to be with her. It gets deeper than that. As noted when it came to Sadi, he is trying to, with his family, survive. He watches members of his family die because of this man. And so, just as you get a sense of the hero in love, trying to protect his potential future in-laws and things happening, you also get the villains, or would-be villains, because sometimes it feels a little bit too murky, who just are poor people trying to survive the best way they can, since what else are they going to do? And because of how invested you get in these characters, it makes it so you do feel torn. There's a bit of a back and forth in your mind. And ultimately, I'll admit, by the time the movie ended, I did cry, but it's too early to tell you why. But overall, when it comes to Kill, it is definitely a rare to find action film, for it knows it doesn't need to just have this driver catalyst which sparks the action that drives its hero all the way to the end. Instead, it focuses on more than a blind rage, and it wants to build up to moments. It wants to build up its villains and also its hero. And even if you don't get to know every single henchman's name, you realize that to somebody or another they mattered. And in having them matter, it makes it so you can't just look at the hero as just taking out another body through fighting, throwing them off a train or whatever, but he's killing somebody. And just like how the action is made to be brutal and to the point where you have to grimace and really think about what just happened to some human being once they get their head bashed or whatever, you also have to think about everything that's happening to this individual and the ripple effect that comes from whatever Fanny does, what CD does, what Amari does, or anybody else, because it's not just one incident on a train and it stops right there. What happens on that train is going to reverberate to the point where the violence can't stop, because there's always going to be this need for revenge.